Please subscribe to our channel, Pacific Front Untold, and be sure to leave a comment after watching a video.
On August 15, 1945, as Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender, members of Unit 731 burned thousands of secret documents in the frigid Harbin air. The Imperial Japanese Army's Covert Biological Warfare Division, established in 1936 under Shirō Ishii, had conducted vivisections without anesthesia, frostbite tests, plague infections, and weaponized disease trials on prisoners of war and Chinese civilians. Yet, after the war, the very scientists responsible for these atrocities were not tried as war criminals. Instead, they were granted immunity by the United States in exchange for their research data. The Allied decision to grant immunity to Unit 731 scientists influenced post-war bioethics and justice. The U.S. government's protection of these war criminals corrupted the moral foundations of post-war international law, prioritized scientific advantage over human rights, and contributed to systemic failures in bioethical accountability that persist today. The immunity deal not only obscured the extent of Japanese war crimes, but also created a precedent where political expediency overrode the universal pursuit of justice. Unit 731 was founded in 1936 in Pingfang, near Harbin, under the pretense of being a water purification unit. In reality, it was the epicenter of Japan's biological warfare program. As historian Sheldon Harris explains, under the cover of a public health mission, Ishii created one of the most sophisticated centers for biological research the world had ever seen, built entirely on the bodies of unwilling victims. The ideological roots of Unit 731 can be traced to the broader ethos of Japanese imperialism. The doctrine of racial superiority, coupled with the dehumanization of Chinese and Korean populations, made large-scale experimentation possible. Historian Hale Gold notes that the ideology of Japanese expansion justified cruelty as necessity. Human beings were dissected in the name of empire. Ishii and his subordinates justified their crimes as essential to protecting Japan from Western domination. Unit 731's experiments included infecting prisoners with bubonic plague, cholera, and anthrax, exposing them to frostbite to study tissue necrosis, and dissecting them alive to examine internal effects. A former member later admitted, "We referred to our subjects not as humans, but as Maruta logs, because that's all they were to us." Between 1936 and 1945, estimates of those killed range from 3,000 to 12,000 people, most being Chinese citizens. When Japan surrendered in 1945, General Ishii ordered the destruction of Unit 731's facilities. Records were burned, prisoners executed, and the compound dismantled. However, the United States quickly learned of Ishii's program through captured documents and interrogations. The U.S. Army's Chemical Corps and the newly established Intelligence Division realized the scientific potential of the data. As historian Peter Williams writes, the Americans recognized that the Japanese had achieved what no one else dared, field-testing biological warfare on humans. That information was too valuable to lose. In September 1945, U.S. intelligence officers met secretly with Ishii and his associates in Tokyo. A classified memorandum from Lieutenant Colonel Murray Sanders to General MacArthur stated, "Japanese biological warfare data should be secured in its entirety for use in future U.S. programs." The resulting negotiation was not about justice, but about scientific advantage. By 1947, the U.S. had decided to grant full immunity to Ishii and his subordinates. The decision was formally approved by General Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP. The justification was simple. The information obtained from Unit 731 could bolster America's own biological warfare research during the emerging Cold War. A secret memorandum from the War Department revealed the moral calculus. The value to the U.S. of Japanese BW data is of such importance to national security that it should be retained under absolute secrecy and not employed for war crimes prosecution. This decision fundamentally compromised the principles established at Nuremberg, where crimes against humanity were declared punishable regardless of wartime context. Historian Barenblatt argues, by sparing Ishii, the U.S. undermined its own moral authority in the Nuremberg trials. Justice was conditional, applied to Nazis, not to allies of convenience. The immunity deal also ensured that the Soviet Union could not use the data or prosecute the scientists themselves. At the 1949 Khabarovsk Trials, the Soviets publicly condemned Japan's biological warfare program and accused the U.S. of concealing war crimes. Testimonies from captured Japanese officers confirmed the existence of mass experimentation and plague bomb testing in Manchuria. The Soviet court sentenced 12 Japanese officers to prison, but Ishii and the core members of Unit 731 were absent, protected in Japan under American supervision. The immunity granted to Unit 731 scientists represents a profound corruption of the post-war justice system. The same U.S. government that led the Nuremberg trials decided to exempt Japanese war criminals from similar scrutiny. As historian Yuma Totani observes, Tokyo's tribunals deliberately avoided any mention of biological warfare, despite overwhelming evidence, to protect strategic interests. In contrast to Germany, where figures like Josef Mengele became synonymous with medical atrocities, Japan's equivalents were reabsorbed into society. Many Unit 731 members assumed prestigious academic and government positions after the war. Dr. Masaji Kitano, Ishii's deputy, later became president of the Green Cross Pharmaceutical Company. Others took senior posts at Japan's National Institute of Health. This reintegration was no accident. It was state-sanctioned. Historian Jingbao Nie calls it a post-war moral amnesia. The U.S. and Japanese governments collaborated to suppress evidence, erase victims, and rewrite narratives. Documents remained classified for over 50 years, only being declassified in the 1990s. The victims' families received no compensation, and the perpetrators were unpunished. The ethical implications of the Unit 731 immunity deal extend far beyond post-war Japan. The decision institutionalized a form of scientific exceptionalism, the belief that knowledge, regardless of how it is obtained, justifies moral compromise. Bioethicist Ruth Fudden writes, "The use of Unit 731's data in U.S. biological research represented the ultimate betrayal of the principle of informed consent, transforming atrocity into utility." In the years following the immunity deal, American biological warfare programs at Fort Detrick expanded rapidly, using some of the very techniques pioneered by Ishii's scientists. The Nuremberg Code, adopted in 1947 to regulate human experimentation, was supposed to prevent such abuses. Yet, as historian Susan Lederer notes, the very nation that helped draft the Nuremberg Code simultaneously violated its spirit by concealing the crimes of Unit 731. Moreover, the concealment of these atrocities delayed the global acknowledgement of biological warfare as a crime against humanity. It was not until the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention that such acts were explicitly prohibited, a full quarter century after the war. The United States' decision to protect Unit 731 scientists was deeply entwined with Cold War geopolitics. As the U.S. sought to rebuild Japan as a bulwark against communism, confronting Japanese war crimes risked destabilizing its new ally. Historian John Dower argues that the suppression of Japan's biological warfare crimes was part of a broader American policy of selective forgetting, a calculated amnesia that prioritized stability over justice. The Khabarovsk Trials, while dismissed in the West as Soviet propaganda, were largely accurate in content. Soviet investigators presented medical records, eyewitness accounts, and confessions, yet the U.S. dismissed the evidence as fabricated and buried their own findings in classified archives. The result was decades of denial. Declassified CIA documents released in 1998 revealed that American officials had detailed knowledge of Unit 731's experiments and used the data in military research. One 1956 CIA report concluded, Japanese BW data contributed to advances in our own defensive program. The ethical corrosion was evident. Data derived from torture was now a tool of national security. The immunity of Unit 731 scientists did not merely distort post-war justice, it shaped the trajectory of bioethics in the latter half of the 20th century. By failing to condemn these crimes, the Allies implicitly accepted the idea that scientific knowledge can outweigh moral law. This precedent reverberated in later ethical crises, from the U.S. Tuskegee syphilis study, 1932 to 1972, to the Cold War radiation experiments on American citizens. Historian Susan Reverby draws a direct line. The same logic that excused Ishii, knowledge over ethics, allowed American scientists to justify human experimentation on their own citizens. In Japan, the silence persisted even longer. Government recognition of Unit 731's crimes came only in the late 1990s after survivors and activists filed lawsuits. In a 2002 Tokyo District Court ruling, the judge acknowledged the atrocities, but ruled that individual compensation claims are not recognized under international law. Victims were left without redress, illustrating the enduring legal vacuum created by the 1947 immunity decision. The moral implications of the Unit 731 immunity deal continue to haunt modern Japan and the international community. In 2018, Japan's National Archives finally released a list of 3,607 former members of Unit 731, which had long been concealed from public view. Yet, as historian Alexis Dudden notes, acknowledgement came too late for justice. It served as a reminder of the price of political expediency. Public education in Japan remains limited regarding these crimes. Unlike Germany, where Holocaust remembrance is central to national identity, Japan's wartime atrocities remain marginalized. As scholar Yuki Tanaka observes, the U.S. partnership in covering up these crimes allowed Japan to reconstruct its post-war identity without full moral reckoning. The immunity deal thus corrupted not only international justice, but also Japan's domestic conscience. The absence of accountability perpetuated a culture of denial, and undermined the ethical foundation of post-war democracy. The Allied decision to grant immunity to Unit 731 scientists exemplifies the corruption of moral judgment in the face of political pragmatism. By prioritizing Cold War intelligence over universal justice, the United States and its allies betrayed the very principles they claimed to uphold after the horrors of World War II. The immunity deal allowed war criminals to live as respected scientists, obstructed justice for thousands of victims, and tainted the integrity of bioethical standards for generations. As historian Edwin Hill concludes, the U.S. gained data but lost its moral compass. Cold War Crimes, 2013, page 92. The legacy of Unit 731 is thus twofold: the physical horror of human experimentation and the ethical decay that followed. The decision to exchange justice for information stands as one of the gravest moral compromises of the 20th century, a reminder that in the pursuit of power, truth itself can be the first casualty.